The bustling sound of the cafe creates a cozy atmosphere. The clinking of cups, laughter in the background, and indistinct conversations. Amidst this scene, Giulia sits across from Chiara, absent-mindedly stirring her coffee with a spoon, as if trying to organize her thoughts. Chiara watches her friend concerned. She notices Giulia's tense shoulders and the tired expression on her face. "Giulia, what's wrong? You look terrible." Giulia lets out a long sigh, leaning back in her chair. She looks out the window, as if trying to escape the conversation, but finally says, "I'm tired, Chiara. It feels like I work and never see results. Every month it's the same thing. I get my paycheck, pay the bills, and then poof, it's gone. It's like the money just disappears." Chiara furrows her brow, intrigued. "Have you ever tried keeping track of your expenses? Sometimes we spend on little things that add up." Giulia shakes her head, almost laughing at herself. "I've tried. Several times. I even downloaded apps, made spreadsheets. For a few weeks, I got obsessed with tracking everything. But then I gave up, because it doesn't make a difference. No matter how much I plan, there's never anything left. It's like I've got a hole in my hands." Chiara leans forward slightly, lowering her voice. "Have you ever thought that it might be about something more than just bad organization?" Giulia looks at her skeptically. "More? Like what?" Chiara chooses her words carefully. "I used to think my problems were just a lack of control until I met Anna. You know, the family constellation therapist. She helped me realize that sometimes we carry things that aren't even ours." Giulia smiles, but it's more skeptical than curious. "Things that aren't ours? What do you mean?" Chiara explains. "Sometimes, without realizing it, we repeat family patterns. It could be something our parents experienced, or even our grandparents. And we inherit those beliefs as if they were our own. But they're not. When you said it feels like money slips through your fingers, it reminded me of how I felt before I did my constellation therapy." For a moment, Giulia says nothing. She looks at the coffee cup in her hands, feeling uncomfortable. Something about Chiara's words resonates inside her, but she doesn't want to admit it. "I don't know, Chiara. It sounds a little too mystical. My problem is just that I'm terrible with money. I've always been. It has nothing to do with my family." Chiara gives a small smile. "Giulia, I understand that it sounds strange. I thought the same at first. But listen to me. The way you handle money isn't just about you. It's about what you heard and experienced as a child. About how your family dealt with money. Does that make sense?" Giulia thinks for a moment, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. She finally responds, "Do you think it could have something to do with my mom? My grandmother?" Chiara shrugs but keeps her tone firm. "I think it's worth exploring. You don't have to believe anything right now. Just try. What do you have to lose?" On her way home, Giulia feels the weight of the conversation. The streets are crowded with people rushing around her, but she barely notices the movement. Chiara's words echo in her mind. Sometimes we carry things that aren't even ours. Suddenly, a memory surfaces. Her mother, sitting in the living room, speaking in a serious tone. "Money disappears quickly. Enjoy it while you have it, because tomorrow it might be gone." The phrase hits her like a punch in the gut. Giulia remembers hearing it many times as a child, but she had never thought about the impact those words might have had on her. When she gets home, Giulia throws her bag onto the couch and sits down heavily. She looks around her small, organized living room, but her mind is in chaos. Memories of her mother and grandmother start surfacing more frequently. Conversations about debts, worries about the future, and the constant fear that money isn't reliable. She picks up her phone, hesitates for a moment, and finally writes to Chiara. "Okay, you win. Send me Anna's contact. I'll give it a try." As she sets her phone down, Giulia feels a mix of curiosity and apprehension. She stares at the ceiling, lost in thought, while her mother's words echo once again. Money disappears quickly. Anna's office is cozy, with neutral tones and soft light streaming through the window. A bookshelf with neatly arranged books, well-kept plants in small pots, and a desk with an open notebook where Anna takes notes complete the scene. Giulia sits in a comfortable armchair, but her posture is tense. She crosses her legs and fidgets with her hair, clearly uncomfortable. Anna watches her with a gentle smile. Her voice is calm, almost soothing. Welcome, Giulia. It's good to see you again. What brings you here today? Giulia lets out a short, nervous laugh, avoiding eye contact. To be honest, I don't know if I believe in this. Chiara convinced me to come. She thinks my money problems might have something to do with my family. Anna tilts her head slightly, without pressuring her. And what do you think about that? Giulia reflects for a moment before responding. I think the problem is me. I've never been good with money. I always spend more than I should. And before I know it, it's gone. I just don't know how to organize myself. Anna smiles softly. I understand. Many people think that way. But sometimes the way we handle money has deeper roots. There may be patterns or family beliefs influencing you without your awareness. Anna guides Giulia to start the constellation process. Let's explore this together. I want you to choose representations for yourself and for money. They can be abstract. They don't need to be literal. Giulia selects 2 wooden pieces from the table. A taller one to represent herself, and a smaller one to symbolize money. Anna positions the pieces a certain distance apart, and asks Giulia to observe how she feels looking at them. Giulia feels a strange discomfort. It's funny, money seems so far away from me. Like it's hard to reach. Anna calmly asks, if money could talk, what do you think it would say to you? Giulia lets out a nervous laugh. It would say, I'm not meant for you. Anna follows up with another question. And what do you feel like saying to it? Giulia thinks for a moment before responding, her voice softer. I'd say, why do you always escape me? As she observes the pieces, Giulia recalls something her mother used to say constantly. Money disappears quickly. Enjoy it while you have it, because tomorrow it might be gone. She stops, furrowing her brow. I never thought about it before, but my mom said that all the time. Maybe it influenced me more than I realized. Anna guides her to choose a piece to represent her mother. She places this new piece near the one representing money, creating a visual connection. Now, I want you to observe how these pieces relate. What do you feel? Giulia remains silent for a few seconds before answering. I feel like my mom was always worried about money, like she could never relax. Anna asks, and how did that affect you? Giulia lets out a deep sigh. I think I felt like money was dangerous, like it wasn't worth holding on to, because it would just disappear anyway. Giulia feels a lump in her throat as she speaks. The pieces on the table seem to represent more than just objects. They become symbols of an emotional burden she had never recognized before. Anna, in her calm voice, says, often we inherit beliefs from our parents without realizing it. They teach us what they know, based on their own experiences. But Giulia, that doesn't mean those beliefs have to be yours. You can choose what to carry forward. Giulia looks at Anna, her eyes shining with a mix of emotion and relief. I never thought about it that way before. It makes sense, but at the same time it's so hard. It feels like it's part of me. Anna concludes the constellation, leaving Giulia with a reflection. Ask your mother what she believes about money. Explore your family's stories. You might discover more than you expect. As she walks home, Giulia feels emotionally overwhelmed. Her mother's phrase replays in her mind, now clearer than ever. Money disappears quickly. Enjoy it while you have it. She begins connecting dots she had never noticed before. She remembers how her mother would get anxious every time the bills arrived, and how there was always a tense atmosphere at home when it came to money. In the quiet of her walk, she wonders, could my relationship with money not be my own? Am I repeating something I didn't even realize? Giulia decides to visit her mother to learn more about her family's past, even though she's not entirely sure what she's looking for. The sweet aroma of freshly baked cake fills the kitchen of Giulia's mother's house. A small table is covered with a faded floral tablecloth, and the sound of kitchen utensils echoes as her mother, busy, prepares the cake's frosting. Giulia sits on a chair by the window, gazing at the garden outside. The afternoon sun illuminates the room, but she seems distracted, lost in thoughts about the constellation. Mom, this cake smells amazing. Is it the orange one? Giulia tries to start the conversation lightly. Her mother answers without looking at her, spreading the frosting. Yes, it is. It's your favorite, isn't it? I thought it'd be nice to make something special today. Giulia smiles faintly, but inside, she feels a growing tension. She knows she needs to bring up the subject, but she's not sure how. Finally, She takes a deep breath and decides to start. Mom, I wanted to ask you something. Her mother finally looks at her, curious. Of course, honey. What is it? Giulia hesitates but continues. Do you remember how it was when I was a kid about money? What did you think about it back then? Her mother furrows her brow, clearly surprised by the question. Money? Why are you asking about that now? Giulia forces a smile, trying to ease the tension. Well, I realized I've never been much of a saver. It feels like money always disappears. And during the Constellation with Anna, I started to wonder, could it have something to do with things I heard or learned when I was little? Her mother puts down the spatula, wiping her hands on her apron. She sits across from Giulia, looking slightly uncomfortable. Well, I don't know what to say about that. You know how hard it was after your father left. I did what I could to pay the bills and still give you what you needed. But it was never easy, Giulia. Never. Giulia watches her mother closely, sensing there's more to it. I know that, Mom. But you always said things like, money disappears quickly, or make the most of it while you have it. Why did you say that? Her mother lets out a deep sigh, as if carrying that weight for years. Because that's what I learned, Giulia. When I was young, your grandmother said it all the time. Did you know she lost everything in the 1970s financial crisis? She invested in something risky, thinking it would change our lives, but it left her in debt. After that, she always said money wasn't reliable, that it wasn't worth saving, because it would disappear anyway. Giulia sits in silence, absorbing the information. She had never thought of her grandmother that way. To her, her grandmother had always been a strong, unshakable figure, but now that image seemed to crumble. So, the way I handle money might have started way back with Grandma. Her mother shrugs, looking melancholy. Maybe, but what I know is that I always carried the fear of ending up like her. I worried so much about having enough for the two of us that sometimes I think it consumed me. And now that you mention it, maybe I passed that on to you. If I did, I'm so sorry, Giulia. Her mother's words bring a mix of relief and pain. Giulia realizes that part of her anxiety about money isn't really hers, but something unconsciously passed down. At the same time, she feels sad seeing her mother's vulnerability, someone who had always tried to be strong. I don't blame you, Mom. I know you did the best you could, but I think I need to change this. I don't want to live with this fear. I want to handle money differently. Her mother smiles sadly, but with a touch of pride. You're right, honey. I lived in fear for so long, and I never imagined it could affect you. I want you to have a better life. And if that means letting go of these beliefs, I support you. Later, Giulia is on her way home, but her mind is elsewhere. Her mother's words echo in her head. Money isn't reliable. It disappears. For the first time, she feels those words carry an emotional weight she needs to let go of. When she gets home, she picks up her phone and calls Anna. Hi Anna, it's Giulia. I need to book another session. There are some things I've discovered, and I think I need to understand them better. As she hangs up, Giulia looks at a pile of bills on the table. Instead of the usual feeling of despair, she feels a glimmer of hope. For the first time, she believes she can change. Anna's office is quieter than usual. Giulia walks in, carrying a different energy, a mix of anxiety and determination. Anna notices her introspective gaze and invites her to sit in the comfortable armchair. Giulia, it's good to see you again. What have you discovered since the last session? Giulia takes a deep breath, as if summoning the courage to begin. I talked to my mom like you suggested. It was eye-opening. She told me about my grandmother, who lost everything in a financial crisis. And suddenly everything clicked. I realized that, since I was little, I've carried this idea that money is something dangerous, something that never stays. That's it, isn't it? I've been repeating this without even noticing. Anna smiles softly, nodding in agreement. Many of the beliefs we carry come from stories like these. You're not alone, Giulia. Now that you've recognized this, we can start working on your freedom from it. Anna asks Giulia to choose wooden pieces to represent herself, her mother, and her grandmother. Giulia observes the pieces arranged on the table and feels an immediate discomfort seeing the distance between them. Anna asks, how do you feel looking at this arrangement? Giulia thinks for a moment before responding. I feel like I'm carrying something, like I'm trying to fix what went wrong before me. Anna, and how do you feel when you look at the figure that represents your grandmother? Giulia stares at the piece, and a memory surfaces in her mind. She recalls her grandmother holding her hands, saying, "You're strong, my girl. But remember, never trust money. It can disappear in an instant." Giulia closes her eyes, feeling the emotional weight of those words. She was so worried, like she wanted to protect me. But I think, without realizing it, she passed that fear on to me. Anna guides her through a symbolic exercise. I want you to say something to the figure that represents your grandmother. Speak as if she were here. Giulia hesitates but finally speaks, her voice trembling. I know you did the best you could. I know you suffered from what happened and only wanted to protect our family. But I don't want to carry this fear. It's yours, not mine. I'm grateful for everything you went through. But I choose to do things differently. Tears stream down Giulia's face as she speaks, but something inside her begins to feel lighter. Anna asks, if the figure of your grandmother could respond, what do you think she would say? After a moment of reflection, Giulia answers. She'd say she understands, that it's okay for me to take a different path, that she only wanted the best for me. Anna smiles. That's powerful, Giulia. You're returning the responsibility to its origin, where it belongs. You can honor your grandmother while creating your own relationship with money. Giulia feels a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time, she allows herself to see money in a different way. Not as an enemy, but as a resource that can be managed with care and confidence. As Anna collects the pieces, she leaves Giulia with a reflective question. Now that you've returned this belief to your grandmother, how do you want to start building your own relationship with money? Giulia responds with a hopeful tone. I think I need to start over. Learn to handle money without fear. It's like relearning everything. Anna smiles. And you can. Every small choice matters. Back home, Giulia looks at her finances for the first time without the usual sense of panic. She spreads out bills and bank statements on the table and grabs an empty notebook to start tracking her expenses. As she writes, she reflects on what Anna said. If this is something I can learn, then I will learn it. I don't have to repeat the same mistakes. I can do things differently. While organizing her papers, Giulia finds a receipt for a recent impulsive purchase, an expensive dress she has never worn. She picks up the receipt and stares at it, feeling a mix of regret and determination. Enough of this, she says to herself. Giulia is sitting at her dining table, surrounded by papers, bills, bank statements, and the notebook where she has started tracking her expenses. There's an air of seriousness and determination in her posture, but also visible tension. She holds a pen, but hesitates before writing anything. As she tries to organize the numbers, a familiar voice echoes in her mind. Money disappears quickly. Enjoy it while you have it. She shakes her head, as if trying to push the memory away, but the phrase seems to stick. With a sigh, she decides to call Chiara. Chiara answers in an upbeat tone. Giulia, how are you? How was your last session with Anna? Giulia tries to reply lightly, but her voice betrays her exhaustion. I think it went well. I feel like I've started to understand where my fear of money comes from. But now that I know, I feel lost. I'm here, staring at all these papers, trying to organize them, but I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing. Chiara laughs softly, empathetically. Welcome to the club. I felt the same way the first time I tried to organize my finances. It's like learning a new language, you know? But you're starting, and that's already a big step. Giulia hesitates before asking, how did you manage to get through it? Because to me it feels so impossible. Chiara responds firmly. I stopped trying to fix everything at once. I started with small things, like tracking my daily expenses and setting limits for myself. You don't have to solve everything today, Giulia. You just need to take the next step. After the call, Giulia looks at the papers in front of her with a renewed perspective. Maybe Chiara's right, she thinks. I don't need to fix everything all at once. I just need to start. She picks up her notebook and writes at the top of the page. Where does my money go? Giulia begins to write down her daily expenses, from grocery shopping to coffee at the cafe. As she writes, she notices patterns she hadn't seen before. Impulsive purchases, subscriptions she doesn't use, small luxuries that add up. Wow, she murmurs to herself. No wonder there's never anything left. Despite her initial frustration, Giulia feels a small wave of relief. For the first time, she's seeing clearly where her money is going. The next day, Giulia walks past a shop window on her way to work. An elegant dress catches her eye. The price, displayed on a golden tag, is steep, but the piece looks perfect. She stops, feeling tempted to walk in and buy it. An inner voice whispers, "You deserve it. You work so hard. Why not treat yourself?" But this time another voice takes over. It's Anna's, from their last Constellation session. You can create your own relationship with money, free from fear. Giulia closes her eyes for a moment, takes a deep breath, and decides to keep walking. "Not today," she says quietly, feeling a mix of pride and discomfort. At home, she reviews her expense list and creates a budget for the first time. She decides to set aside a specific amount for savings, even if it's small, and another for leisure spending. She calls Chiara to share her progress. "Chiara, I made a budget. And I think I finally understand what you meant. It feels small, but it's like I'm starting to take back control." Chiara cheers enthusiastically. "That's amazing, Giulia. Small steps lead to big changes. I'm so proud of you." Later, Giulia is sitting on her balcony, gazing at the night sky. She feels a mix of hope and fear but notices something new, a small spark of confidence. For the first time, she believes she can change her relationship with money. As she looks at the stars, she whispers to herself, "I won't let fear control me anymore. I choose to do things differently." The next day, Giulia receives a proposal from a client at work. It's a big project that could bring significant earnings, but also demands more responsibility. She hesitates, feeling the old fear creeping back. "Am I capable?" she asks herself, staring at the contract. The phone rings in Anna's office. It's Giulia. Her voice is filled with anxiety but also determination. "Anna, I need your help. Something happened. I'm trying to change, but there's something I still can't overcome. It's like I'm afraid of success. Can you fit me in for a session?" Anna, in her calm voice, replies, "Of course, Giulia. Come tomorrow. We'll explore this together." The afternoon sun gently lights the office, creating a welcoming atmosphere. Giulia walks in, carrying an invisible weight. She sits down in the armchair and takes a deep breath. "Anna, I think I'm improving. I'm getting more organized, thinking more carefully before I spend. But there's something I can't explain. It's like every time a bigger opportunity comes up, something inside me screams that I won't be able to handle it, that it's better to give up before even trying." Anna watches closely, sensing Giulia's vulnerability. "Do you remember feeling this way before, in other areas of your life?" Giulia reflects for a moment. "Yes, many times. When I got my first job, I thought I wouldn't last. When I was promoted, I was afraid I couldn't handle it. And now, with this new opportunity at work, it feels like something inside me wants to stop me." Anna guides Giulia to start the constellation process. She asks Giulia to choose wooden pieces to represent herself and the fear she feels. Giulia observes the pieces and selects a third to represent her mother. "I want you to observe how these pieces interact and tell me how you feel," Anna says. Giulia looks at the piece representing her mother, placed next to the one for fear, and feels a lump in her throat. "I feel like the fear is connected to my mother, like it came from her." Anna encourages her to continue. "If fear could speak, what would it say to you?" With tears in her eyes, Giulia responds, "It would say that trying is dangerous, that if I fail, I'll hurt myself and the people around me." Anna watches empathetically. "And if the figure representing your mother could respond, what would she say to fear?" Giulia reflects before answering, her voice choked with emotion. She would say, "I understand you. I was afraid too, but I needed to protect my daughter." Anna gently asks, "Giulia, what was your relationship with your mother like when you were a child?" Giulia takes a deep breath, diving into her memories. "My mother was always worried. Bills, money, everything was a problem. She was physically present, but emotionally, she felt distant. I knew she loved me, but she never seemed to have the time or energy to show it." Anna explains, "Often, we associate money with emotional experiences. If money was a constant source of stress for your mother, you may have learned to associate financial success with absence or a lack of affection. Does that make sense to you? Giulia feels a tightness in her chest. It does. I think I've always associated money with sacrifice. Maybe I'm afraid of earning more because, in my mind, it means losing other things like love or affection. Anna guides Giulia through a symbolic exercise to rewrite this belief. I want you to say something to the figure representing your mother. Say what you feel. Giulia hesitates but finally finds her voice. With tears streaming down her face, she says, "Mom, I know you did the best you could. I know you carried much more than you should have. And I'm grateful for everything you gave me. But I choose to live differently. I choose to believe that success can be light, that I can have money without losing love." Anna, with an encouraging tone, asks, "What do you think the figure of your mother would say to that?" Giulia responds, now with a shy smile. She would say she supports me, that she only wanted me to be happy. That's all she ever wanted. Giulia feels an immediate sense of relief, as if a weight has been lifted off her shoulders. For the first time, she can imagine a future where money isn't synonymous with fear or sacrifice. Anna concludes the session with a reflection. You've taken a big step today, Giulia. Remember, changing deep-seated beliefs is a process, but you're on the right path. Keep choosing to believe that money can be a source of security, not fear. In the following days, Giulia starts making bolder changes. She accepts the new project at work despite her initial fear, and feels like she's finally confronting her challenges with courage. During a meeting, the client praises her proposal, and Giulia feels a wave of confidence she's never experienced before. Later, she calls Chiara to share the news. "Chiara, I accepted the project. And you know what's crazy? I didn't feel the fear I usually do. It's like for the first time, I believe I'm capable." Chiara, emotional, responds, "I knew you could do it, Giulia. You're transforming, and I'm so proud of you." That evening, Giulia sits on her balcony, holding a cup of tea in her hands. She watches the city lights and reflects on her journey. I still have a long way to go, she thinks. But today, for the first time, I feel like I'm in control. Not completely, but enough to believe I can get there. With a serene smile, she murmurs to herself, "I can build a new story, without fear, without sacrifice." As Giulia finishes her tea, a notification pops up on her phone. A new opportunity at work, even bigger than the current project. She stares at the screen, knowing the next step will be challenging, but with newfound confidence. Giulia sits at her desk, surrounded by papers and notes. Her posture, once hesitant, is now more assured. She's reviewing the details of a new project she was hired for, the biggest of her career so far. Holding a cup of coffee, she rereads the client's approval email, a shy smile playing on her lips. "I actually did it," she murmurs to herself, still trying to absorb the moment. But soon the smile fades. A familiar doubt resurfaces in her mind. Will I be able to handle it? What if I fail? What if I lose everything again? Giulia takes a deep breath, remembering what Anna said during their last Constellation session. You can build a new story. Choose to believe that success can be light. She writes at the top of her notebook, "I am capable. I deserve this." As she rereads the phrase, she feels a mix of fear and determination. Later, Giulia meets Chiara at a small, cozy restaurant. The smell of freshly cooked food and the clinking of utensils fill the air. They sit at a corner table, where they can talk more privately. Chiara, always observant, notices the tension on Giulia's face. "So tell me, how's the new project going?" Giulia fiddles with her water glass, hesitating. "It's going well. I think it is. But I still have that voice in my head. You know? That constant doubt. What if I'm not good enough?" Chiara places a comforting hand on her friend's arm, offering a warm smile. "Giulia, you need to remember the journey you've already taken. Look at how much you've changed in the past few months. You accepted the project. That alone is huge." Giulia sighs, but Chiara's smile is contagious. "You're right. Sometimes I forget to look back and see what I've already accomplished." The two begin reminiscing about moments of transformation. From Giulia's first session with Anna to the small financial victories she has achieved. Chiara teases, Remember that expensive dress you wanted to buy? The fact that you managed to resist was already a miracle. Giulia laughs, genuinely amused. I know, right? I think even the salespeople were shocked. Their conversation ends on a lighter note, leaving Giulia energized by Chiara's positivity. The next morning, Giulia organizes her finances at home. She has opened a simple savings account at the bank and, for the first time, can picture a more stable financial future. She reflects on how, in the past, the idea of saving felt suffocating. Now she sees it as a way to take care of herself. Every small step counts. She thinks as she transfers part of her paycheck into her savings account. At the end of the day, she updates her budget in her notebook, realizing that little by little, she is building a solid foundation. Giulia meets with her team to discuss the next steps for the project. During the meeting, a colleague praises her organization and creativity, something that catches her off guard. She reflects on how, in the past, she would have dismissed such a compliment, thinking it was luck or courtesy. But this time she accepts it. Thank you. I'm really excited about what we're building, she replies with a confident smile. Later, Giulia decides to call Anna to share how she feels. Anna, I just wanted to thank you for everything. Today, I realized I'm starting to see myself differently. I'm still afraid sometimes, but I don't let it control me anymore. Anna responds in her calm voice. Giulia, that's a huge step forward. Fear may continue to appear, but you've learned not to let it dictate your actions. That's how you build a new relationship with yourself and the world. Giulia, emotional, says, I never imagined I could get this far, but now I see it's possible. Thank you for helping me see that. That evening, Giulia finds an old picture frame in a drawer. It's a photo of her with her mother and grandmother together. She smiles but feels a pang of sadness as she remembers everything those women endured. She holds the photo and says out loud, I carry you in my heart, but I choose a different path. For me, for us. This simple but powerful declaration gives her peace. The next morning, Giulia receives an unexpected email, an invitation to participate in a conference on women and finances, where she could share her story of overcoming challenges. She reads the message several times, her heart racing. A new fear arises. Am I ready for this? But then, with a determined smile, she murmurs to herself, Of course I am. The sound of clinking silverware and laughter fills the dining room in Giulia's home. She's organized a special dinner to celebrate her accomplishments and bring together the people who were instrumental in her journey. Her mother, Chiara, and Anna. The table is decorated with simplicity and charm. Candles are lit, creating a cozy atmosphere. Giulia pours wine, wearing a light but genuine smile. For the first time, she feels at peace with herself and her choices. Chiara watches the scene with a proud smile. Giulia, look at you. Hosting a dinner, managing your finances, taking on a big project at work. Who would have thought? Giulia laughs, pretending to be offended. I'm going to pretend that wasn't a dig, Chiara. Anna chimes in with her calm voice. I think Chiara is just trying to say how proud she is of you. And I am too. You've come such a long way, Giulia. And this is just the beginning. Giulia sits at the table and looks around. She reflects on how, just a few months ago, she never would have imagined hosting something like this. I only got here because of all of you. Mom, Chiara, Anna, you helped me see things I never could before. Today, for the first time, I feel like I'm in control. Not completely, but enough to believe I can build something lasting. Her mother smiles, visibly emotional. I just want you to know how proud I am of you, my dear. I know I passed some of my fears and insecurities onto you, but seeing how much you've grown makes me think that maybe I can change some things too. Her mother's words touch everyone at the table. Giulia takes her hand and responds, Mom, everything you did was out of love. I know that now, and I want you to know that, even though we carried some hard things, we've always had each other. That's what matters. Anna watches with a calm smile. These moments of reconnection are what make Constellation work so powerful. When we recognize where we come from, we can move forward without being bound by the past. Later, after the dinner, Giulia is alone in the kitchen, washing the last of the dishes. The sound of running water is soothing, and she reflects on how much her life has changed. She remembers the session, when she told the figure representing her grandmother, "I choose to do things differently." Now, she realizes that choice was the beginning of it all. Looking at the stack of clean dishes, she smiles and thinks, "Every small decision counts." And now, I finally see that. The next day at work, Giulia receives an email with the subject line, "Invitation to a lecture, Women in Finances, a Journey of Transformation." She opens the email with curiosity and finds out she's been nominated by a colleague to speak at an event, sharing her story of overcoming challenges. Her heart races. The old Giulia would probably have ignored the invitation, overwhelmed by the fear of failure or not being good enough. But now, she takes a deep breath and writes a response. It would be an honor to participate. The following week, Giulia stands on a small, intimate stage. The auditorium is full of women of various ages, all listening attentively. Giulia begins her talk with a steady but emotional voice. "Hello everyone. My name is Giulia, and I never imagined I'd be here today. Just a few months ago, I was a woman working hard, but never knowing where my money went. I thought the problem was all mine, that I was incapable of managing my finances. But with the support of incredible people and a transformative process called family constellation work, I discovered that what held me back wasn't a lack of skill, but the stories I carried. Stories that came from generations before me. Stories of fear, loss, and sacrifice." She pauses, looking out at the audience. "Today, I choose to live my own story. I choose to build a future where money isn't an enemy but a tool. And if I can do it, I'm confident that any of you can too." The audience applauds, and Giulia feels a wave of pride and gratitude. As she steps off the stage, several women approach her to share their own experiences and thank her for the inspiration. That evening, Giulia sits on her balcony with a glass of wine in her hand. She watches the city lights and reflects on how her journey has brought her to this moment. She picks up the notebook where she tracks her finances and writes at the bottom of the page, "I am capable. I am enough. And my story is just beginning." With a serene smile, she closes the notebook and looks up at the starry sky, ready for whatever comes next. Giulia learned that sometimes the chains that bind us are invisible, but not unbreakable. By facing the past with honesty and courage, she found the key to building a future of freedom and prosperity. And just like her, each of us can choose to rewrite our story,